Montana Territory, 1878. The charred remains of the Zimmerman homestead smoldered under a bruised twilight sky, tendrils of smoke rising like ghostly fingers into the crisp autumn air. 19-year-old Nora Zimmerman stood motionless at the edge of what had once been her family's land, her golden blonde hair loose and tangled around her shoulders, her once fine blue calico dress now stained with soot and torn at the hem. 3 days ago, she had been the cherished daughter of a prosperous rancher. Now she was nothing but a girl with empty hands and a broken heart. No one comes out of this life unscathed, her father used to say. The West takes what it wants, when it wants. She had dismissed his warnings as the musings of an overprotective father. Now, with her parents freshly buried on the hillside behind what remained of their home, those words haunted her. Trust and hope were dangerous things on the frontier. Love was a luxury she could no longer afford, not when survival demanded every ounce of her strength. What Nora needed was to make it through each day without breaking down completely. What she wanted was revenge against the rustlers who had murdered her parents and burned their ranch while she was in town buying supplies. But revenge required resources, and she had nothing left but the clothes on her back and the small leather pouch of coins hidden in her boot. Hardly enough to rebuild a life, let alone seek justice. The sound of approaching hoofbeats pulled her from her thoughts. Instinctively, her hand moved to the small Derringer pistol tucked into her waistband, the last gift her father had given her. A lone rider appeared over the ridge, silhouetted against the fading light. As he drew closer, she could make out a lean young man aboard a chestnut gelding, his dark hair visible beneath a well-worn Stetson. "Evening, miss," he called, slowing his horse to a walk. "Vaughn Keller. I work for the Double Circle Ranch south of here." His eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened face, surveyed the destruction before shifting back to her with an expression of genuine concern. He couldn't have been more than 25, with a clean-shaven jaw that spoke of recent grooming and shoulders that filled out his denim jacket with the promise of strength. "You should keep riding, Mr. Keller," Nora said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Nothing here but ashes and bad memories now." He dismounted anyway, keeping a respectful distance. "I heard about what happened to the Zimmermans. I'm mighty sorry for your loss. Are you kin?" "I am," was their daughter. The words caught in her throat. Nora Zimmerman. Something shifted in his expression, recognition, perhaps, or pity. She hated both possibilities equally. "Miss Zimmerman, you shouldn't be out here alone. Night's coming, and those men might return." "I have nowhere else to go," she admitted, hating the vulnerability in her voice. He took a step closer, removing his hat. "I've got a proposition for you, if you'll hear it." And just like that, the predictable path of her life, the one leading inevitably toward destitution or dependence, forked unexpectedly before her. 2 weeks later, Nora found herself seated on a fallen log beside a small campfire, watching as Vaughn Keller prepared a modest dinner of beans and salt pork. They were a day's ride from the nearest town, following a trail that Vaughn believed would lead them to the rustlers who had destroyed her home. Nora had initially refused his offer of help, convinced that accepting assistance would only lead to further heartbreak. But Vaughn had been persistent, arguing that his skills as a tracker and his connections throughout the territory could help her find justice. "The way I see it," he said, handing her a tin plate of food, "those men took something precious from you. I aim to help you get something back." "Why?" she asked, not for the first time. "We were strangers until 2 weeks ago." Vaughn's steady gaze met hers across the flickering flames. "My pa always said a man's measure is what he does when no one's watching and what he stands for when everyone is. I can't ride past someone in need and call myself a man." There was something disarming about his honesty, something that made her want to believe in goodness again. She had watched him these past weeks, how he treated his horse with gentle respect, how he spoke to everyone they encountered with the same straightforward courtesy, how he slept outside her door at each and they stayed in, guarding her reputation as carefully as her safety. "Tell me about your family," she said, surprising herself with the request. "Not much to tell. Pa was a farmer back in Kentucky. Lost the land after the war and headed west. Died of fever 3 years back. Ma followed 6 months later." He shrugged, but Nora caught the shadow that passed over his features. "Been on my own since, working ranch jobs, saving for my own spread someday." "So you understand," she said softly, "what it means to lose everything." I reckon I do. He poked at the fire. Difference is, I had time to say goodbye. You didn't. The crack of a twig in the darkness beyond their camp silenced them both. Vaughn was on his feet in an instant, revolver drawn. Stay low, he whispered, positioning himself between Nora and the sound. 3 men emerged from the shadows, each armed, their faces partially concealed by bandanas pulled up over their noses. Well now, what do we have here? The tallest of them drawled. A cowboy and his lady friend. Out for a romantic evening? Nora's blood ran cold as she recognized the voice. It belonged to one of the men she had glimpsed riding away from her burning home. We're just passing through, Vaughn said evenly. No quarrel with you gentlemen. That's so. The tall man's eyes shifted to Nora, narrowing slightly. Wait a minute. I know that face. You're the Zimmerman girl. In a fluid motion, Nora drew her derringer and aimed it at the man's chest. And you're the coward who murdered my parents. What followed happened so quickly that Nora would later struggle to piece together the sequence of events. The outlaws drew their weapons. Vaughn fired twice. Someone shouted. A bullet whizzed past her ear. When the echoes faded, 2 of the men lay motionless on the ground, and the third, the tall one she recognized, was wounded but scrambling for his horse. Stop him, she cried, but Vaughn was already in pursuit. The outlaw managed to mount and spur his horse, but not before Vaughn caught hold of his leg and dragged him back to the ground. The 2 men grappled in the dirt as Nora approached, her derringer trained on the outlaw's head. Give me one reason why I shouldn't put a bullet in you right now, she demanded. The man spat blood. Go ahead, little girl. Your pa begged for his life too, right before I put him down. Vaughn's fist connected with the man's jaw, silencing him. Nora, he said, his voice taut with restraint. This isn't the way. He deserves to die, she insisted, her finger trembling on the trigger. Yes, he does. But you don't deserve to carry that weight. Vaughn pulled the outlaw's arms behind his back, binding them with a length of rope. We'll take him to the marshal in Billings. Let justice be done properly. Justice? She laughed bitterly. There's no justice out here. Only survival. Then survive better than he did, Vaughn urged. Choose something besides vengeance. Her hand wavered, then slowly lowered. The outlaw's sneer turned to confusion as Vaughn hauled him to his feet. You're making a mistake, the man growled. The others will come looking for me. Let them come, Vaughn replied calmly. We'll be waiting. The journey to Billings took 3 days, with the outlaw, a man named Jeb Harker, wanted in 2 territories for murder and theft, securely bound and under constant watch. Each night, Nora lay awake, torn between the desire for immediate revenge and the growing certainty that Vaughn was right. Killing Harker might satisfy her rage, but it wouldn't bring her parents back, and it would forever change who she was. On the second night, she ventured closer to where Vaughn sat keeping watch. Do you really believe justice exists out here? She asked. I believe in trying to build something better than what we have, he replied. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it? My father believed that too. She hugged her knees to her chest. He used to say that the frontier wasn't just about claiming land, but about deciding what kind of people we wanted to be on it. Vaughn nodded. Smart man. I miss him. The admission brought unexpected tears. I miss both of them so much it physically hurts. Without a word, Vaughn moved closer and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. The simple comfort of human contact broke something inside her, and for the first time since finding her parents' bodies, Nora allowed herself to sob openly. Vaughn held her, saying nothing, offering only the steady strength of his presence. When she finally quieted, he spoke. After my parents died, I thought the loneliness would kill me faster than any bullet. Took me a while to realize something important. What's that? She asked, her voice hoarse. The people we love never really leave us. They become part of who we are. His arm tightened briefly around her. Your parents live on in you, Nora. In everything you do, every choice you make. From his place by the fire, Jeb Harker scoffed. Sweet sentiments for a dead girl walking. When my boys find us, be quiet, Vaughn said without raising his voice, or I'll gag you for the rest of the trip. Harker subsided with a muttered curse, but his words had already taken root in Nora's mind. Even if they delivered him to the marshal successfully, his gang would come after her. She would never be safe. In Billings, the marshal received Harker with evident surprise. Been after this one for months, he admitted, studying the papers Vaughn had prepared detailing the crimes against the Zimmermans. You folks are lucky to be alive. Luck had nothing to do with it, Nora replied. Mr. Keller is very good at what he does. The marshal eyed Vaughn with new respect. I'll need you both to testify at the trial. Trial? Harker laughed. You think I'll live long enough for that? My boys'll have me out by morning. We'll see about that, the marshal said grimly. Meanwhile, Miss Zimmerman, I suggest you find somewhere safe to stay. There's a decent boarding house 2 streets over. Outside the marshal's office, Nora faced Vaughn with reluctance. I suppose this is where we part ways. You've done more than enough, and I'm grateful. Vaughn shook his head. Harker's right about one thing. His gang will come looking. I'm not leaving you unprotected. I can't ask you to risk your life further. You didn't ask. I'm offering. He touched her arm lightly. Besides, I reckon we make a pretty good team. Before she could respond, a voice called Vaughn's name. They turned to see a broad-shouldered man approaching, his weathered face breaking into a smile beneath a neatly trimmed gray beard. Thomas, Vaughn greeted him. Didn't expect to see you in town. Supply run. The man explained before turning curious eyes toward Nora. Who's your friend? Nora Zimmerman. This is Thomas Grant, foreman at the Double Circle and the closest thing to family I've got left. Thomas's expression sobered as he recognized her name. I heard what happened at your folks' place. Terrible business. We just brought in one of the men responsible, Vaughn explained. But his gang's still out there, and they'll be looking for payback. Thomas considered this information with a frown. Then you'd best get Miss Zimmerman somewhere safe. And I mean truly safe, not a boarding house in town where anyone might find her. I was thinking the same, Vaughn agreed. The ranch is the first place they'll look for her if they know you're involved, Thomas interrupted. No, you need somewhere unexpected. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. My sister's place up near Helena might work. Remote enough to be secure, close enough to civilization if trouble comes. I appreciate the concern, Nora interjected, but I won't be driven into hiding. These men took everything from me. I won't give them my freedom too. Both men stared at her with matching expressions of concern, but it was Vaughn who finally nodded. What do you propose instead? We set a trap, she said firmly. Use me as bait to draw them out, then capture them just like we did Harker. Absolutely not, Vaughn said immediately. It's too dangerous. More dangerous than running forever? She stood her ground. This is my fight, Vaughn. I get to decide how to face it. Thomas looked between them with raised eyebrows. I'll let you two sort this out. Vaughn, find me at the general store when you've made a decision. He tipped his hat to Nora. Miss Zimmerman, a pleasure. As Thomas walked away, Vaughn guided Nora toward a quiet corner of the street. You can't seriously be considering using yourself as bait. I'm not considering it. I've decided. She met his concerned gaze steadily. But I won't do it alone. I need your help. Their argument continued through dinner at the local hotel restaurant, where Vaughn insisted on getting a room for Nora while he took one across the hall. By morning, they had reached a compromise. They would remain in Billings for Harker's preliminary hearing, then spread word that Nora was returning to her family's land to salvage what she could. The marshal would provide deputies to watch the property, and Vaughn would stay with her. It's still too risky, he maintained as they finished breakfast. These men are killers. So am I, when I need to be, she replied. Or have you forgotten how we met? Something in her determination must have finally convinced him, because he sighed deeply. 3 days. If they haven't shown up by then, we try something else. The preliminary hearing was brief but illuminating. Harker, facing the evidence against him, attempted to bargain for leniency by naming his accomplices and their likely hideout. The marshal dispatched riders to investigate, but Nora remained convinced that at least some of the gang would come for her first. Harker's their leader, she explained to Vaughn as they rode toward her former home the following day. They'll want revenge for his capture, and I'm the easier target. The ruins of the Zimmerman ranch looked even more desolate in full daylight. Nora fought back tears as she dismounted and walked through the charred timbers of what had once been her home. Vaughn gave her space, busying himself with setting up camp in a small stand of trees where they would have shelter and a clear view of the surrounding area. That evening, as they sat by a small, carefully screened fire, Vaughn broke their companionable silence. I've been thinking about what happens after we catch these men. After justice is done. He stared into the flames. What will you do then? The question caught her off guard. She had been so focused on revenge that she hadn't allowed herself to consider a future beyond it. I don't know. Sell the land, maybe. Try to start over somewhere. You could rebuild here, he suggested. Your father chose this spot for good reasons. Water nearby, good grazing land. Rebuild what? A ranch takes money, livestock, hands to work it. She shook her head. I have none of those things. You have more than you think. He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a folded document, which he handed to her. Thomas had this drawn up in town today. Confused, Nora unfolded the paper and read its contents by firelight. It was a partnership agreement, offering her a half share in a new ranching venture to be established on her land, with capital investment from Vaughn Keller. I don't understand, she said, looking up at him. Where did you get the money for this? Been saving every penny since I started working cattle at 16. His expression was earnest, almost vulnerable. Was going to buy my own spread someday, but this land is better than anything I could afford on my own. And it means something to you. Why would you do this? He looked away briefly, as though gathering courage. Because in 2 weeks of knowing you, Nora Zimmerman, I've seen more strength and determination than in most men I've known my whole life. Because I believe in what we could build here together. His voice softened. And because the thought of you riding away after this is over sits wrong in my chest. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Are you proposing a business arrangement, Mr. Keller, or something else? Right now, just business. He met her eyes steadily. The rest, well, that would be up to you in time. No pressure, no expectations, just possibility. Before she could respond, a twig snapped in the darkness beyond their camp. Both of them froze, hands moving to their weapons. Vaughn extinguished their small fire with a handful of dirt, plunging them into darkness. 3 riders, he whispered, coming from the east. They slipped into the shadows of the trees, positioning themselves with clear lines of sight. As the riders approached, Nora could make out their silhouettes against the starlit sky. They moved with the caution of men expecting trouble, exactly what she had anticipated. The next few minutes unfolded in a blur of shouted warnings, gunfire, and chaos. The marshal's deputies, positioned around the property, emerged from hiding. 2 of the outlaws surrendered quickly when surrounded, but the third, a wiry man with a distinctive scar across his cheek, made a desperate break toward the trees where Nora was hidden. She stepped into his path, her father's revolver aimed at his chest. That's far enough. The man skidded to a halt, his own weapon half raised. For a suspended moment, they faced each other in the moonlight. You're the Zimmerman girl, he said, surprise evident in his voice. Thought you'd be long gone by now. I have unfinished business here, she replied coldly. Put down your gun. He laughed, a harsh, desperate sound. So you can hang me like you're planning to hang Jeb? I don't think so, sweetheart. Your choice, she said, adjusting her aim. Surrender or die right here. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The outlaw's eyes narrowed as he made his decision. He began to raise his gun. Nora's finger tightened on the trigger. And then Vaughn was there, tackling the man from the side just as both weapons discharged. Nora screamed as she saw Vaughn fall. The outlaw scrambled to his feet, only to be dropped by a shot from one of the approaching deputies. Nora was already on her knees beside Vaughn, frantically searching for a wound in the darkness. I'm all right, he gasped, though his face was contorted with pain. Caught me in the shoulder, that's all. The relief that flooded her was so powerful it left her dizzy. Don't you dare die on me, Vaughn Keller, she choked out. Not when you've just offered me a future. His bloodied hand found hers in the darkness. Not planning on it. The following weeks passed in a haze of activity. Vaughn's wound, while painful, proved less serious than initially feared. The captured outlaws faced justice in Billings, with Harker and 2 others sentenced to hang for murder. Nora testified at their trial, finally facing down the men who had destroyed her family with the strength and dignity that would have made her parents proud. Throughout his recovery, Vaughn remained in Billings, staying at the same hotel as Nora while they made plans for the future. Thomas Grant became a frequent visitor, offering advice on rebuilding the ranch and promises of help from the Double Circle hands. You sure about this partnership, Vaughn? Thomas asked one evening as they reviewed building plans. Ranching's hard enough without complications. I'm sure, Vaughn replied, his eyes finding Nora's across the table. What had begun as respect between them had deepened during those weeks of shared purpose and danger. Nora found herself watching Vaughn when he wasn't looking, admiring the quiet competence with which he handled every challenge, the kindness he showed to everyone around him, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She had entered their partnership thinking only of rebuilding her home, but now she found herself contemplating a different kind of future. By early spring, the first new structures of the Keller-Zimmerman ranch were taking shape. A modest cabin rose where the original house had stood, with a larger home planned for later. Corrals and a small barn followed quickly, and cattle purchased with Vaughn's savings grazed on the surrounding land. On a warm evening in May, Nora stood on the porch of their cabin, watching as Vaughn worked with a young horse in the corral. The setting sun gilded his features and cast long shadows across the newly built structures of their shared enterprise. 6 months had passed since the night they had met among the ashes of her former life. 6 months of working side by side, of shared meals and conversations, of gradually healing wounds both physical and emotional. Vaughn spotted her watching and waved, releasing the horse and making his way toward the cabin. He moved with the easy grace of a man at home in his own skin, his injured shoulder now fully healed. "Beautiful evening," he remarked, joining her on the porch. "Yes, it is." She turned to face him fully. "I've been thinking about our arrangement." His expression sobered slightly. "Oh, having second thoughts." "Not exactly." She took a deep breath. "Do you remember what you said the night we caught those outlaws? About our partnership being just business, with the rest being up to me?" "I remember." His voice was careful, controlled. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. No pressure, Nora. The thing is," she continued, her heart pounding, "I've lost so much. My family, my home, the future I thought I would have. For a long time, I believed that loss defined me, that the frontier had taken everything worth having and left me hollow." He waited, watching her with those earnest blue eyes that had become so dear to her. "But then I met you," she said softly, "and you showed me that even in the harshest places, even after the worst losses, something new can grow. Something good." Hope dawned in his expression. "Nora, I don't want just a business partner, Vaughn. I want a life partner." She reached for his hand. "I want you." The joy that transformed his features was answer enough, but his words completed it. "You've had me since the moment you stood among the ashes of your home and refused to be broken by what happened there." He drew her into his arms, and when their lips met for the first time, Nora felt the last remnants of her grief and anger fall away. This was what her parents would have wanted for her, not just survival, but love, not just endurance, but happiness. Later, as they walked hand in hand around the property in the gathering dusk, planning the garden she would plant and the additions he would build, Vaughn stopped suddenly and turned to her. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," he said, reaching into his pocket. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He withdrew a simple gold band and held it out to her. "Nora Zimmerman, when I found you, you thought you had lost everything. I'm asking you now to take my name, to build a life with me, to create something neither of us could manage alone." Through tears of joy, she nodded. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Nora realized that the frontier hadn't taken everything from her after all. It had simply cleared the way for something she hadn't known to hope for, a love strong enough to withstand the harshest challenges of the West, and a partner who saw her strength even when she couldn't see it herself. That summer, they were married beneath the spreading branches of an old cottonwood tree that had somehow survived the fire. Thomas Grant stood as Vaughn's best man, and half the county turned out to celebrate the union of the young couple whose courage and determination had become something of a legend in the territory. As Nora Keller looked around at the gathering, at the home she and Vaughn had built, at the land that was flourishing again under their care, at the future stretching bright before them, she finally understood what her father had meant about the frontier. It wasn't just a place that took. It was a place that demanded strength and then rewarded it tenfold. "Happy?" Vaughn asked, his arms securely around her waist as they greeted their well-wishers. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. Where once she had been defined by loss, now she was defined by love, by the family she and Vaughn would create, by the community they were building, by the legacy they would leave on this land. She had lost everything, yes, but in that loss, She had found something far more precious, a love as vast and enduring as the western sky above them, and a partner who would stand beside her through whatever challenges the frontier might bring.